If as an adult you're asked what the 1 plus 1 is and you say 3, people assume that you're an accountant. As a child, somebody asks you what 1 plus 1 is and you say 3, they think you're an idiot and that you haven't done your maths homework. This is Tonight. I'm Bruce Whitfield, and tonight we find out whether we should be concerned about South Africa's maths and science ranking. The World Economic Forum says we are the worst at educating our young people on maths and science. Or is the statistic simply hogwash? Joining me this evening, Marius Oosthuizen, who's from GIBS. He's a futurist. And then also from Adil Nchabeleng, who's the Group Chief Executive Officer of the Whitford Group of Companies. Do we have a crisis, Adil?
Mathematically, yes, we do have a crisis, Bruce, with regards to the education level and the outcome of metric results. The outcome is quite really damning because of the learners in the educational side of it. Particularly at the mathematics level, we are having less than 100,000 people passing mathematics.
You want to differentiate them between mathematics and numeracy, because the numeracy is taught in the schools, but mathematics is where the real problem lies.
Correct. The current emphasis has been placed on mathematics in terms of math literacy rather than mathematics as a core subject, and that's where the current problem is sitting at.
Now, from a government perspective, you say, well, you need to know how to count and add, subtract and divide before you can move on to the complexities of calculus, algebra and geometry. Is that not a natural building block? Isn't that what they're trying to do?
No, mathematics literacy is actually for basics. It's for ground building. You know, it's really for foundation level.
You should be over it by the time you're 10.
You should be over it, yes, of course. You know, we came from an education system whereby math literacy was taught from A up to standard 5.
Yeah.
The current mathematics literacy is actually continued to the level of matric, and that's where the crisis is sitting at.
So it's an education department failing rather than the fact that our people are stupid.
Not necessarily the department. Mathematics is available as a subject within the education system and in the curricula, but it's actually the implementation as well as the encouraging of students to come on board to learn mathematics, and there are deeper problems in terms of the learning component part of it.
Explain it to me.
The issues are related to, one, the dissemination. We have mathematics taught in languages, particularly in one language, which is English, and most of the learners of that particular subject in mathematics are not English speaking. And they have challenges when they come to a higher level in terms of their grade, because they are not in the position to particularly translate what they have learned from a theory point of view in terms of the practical element. And that's where the challenges are sitting. So we need to literally spend far much more time and put far much more effort in making sure that we have the strong building blocks that ensures. And if you look at various countries, mathematics is taught in mother tongue language. Talk about India, talk about China, talk about Brazil, talk about Russia, all of those countries, talk about Cuba. All of them build an elementary foundation. What we call mathematics literacy is actually built within an elementary foundation. You know very well, for instance, if you look at the South African education system, Afrikaans education was able to build competency within the maths and science level. Yes. Why? Because it was delivered in the mother tongue.
It seems far too simple a solution. Is it that simple?
It's not as a solution. It is simple if we change our mindsets. Yeah. The current issue is the paradigm issue. Policy is in place. They've got all the resources, the support. We've got teachers, we've got schools, we've got huge curricula and the support of their curricula. What needs to be done is the practicalizing it.
Is the curriculum adequate?
Curriculum is highly adequate. Okay. Because the requirement of the passing rate of the curricula is currently being applied. But why is it that we're not getting the results? It's the encouragement and the dissemination, the application model, whereby you have the teachers who have been well capacitated, who are passionate enough, who understand the topic, who understand the delivery of particularly the maths and the science component, and you have the students who are literally excited to learn. The current doesn't exist right now. The department provides a whole lot of support, but in between we have a vacuum. Again, with the socio-economic support and the socio-economic environment. Poor kids from poor environment do not have. One of the statistics that actually we've been looking at our research and report here, we've produced a report on math literacy and mathematics. We've produced a report in terms of analyzing and evaluating what the current statistics are saying regarding the challenge relating to mathematics in South Africa. Do you know what it reflects?
Yeah.
Poverty is the key driver of the challenge of learning mathematics.
Yeah. It's interesting because Mark Barnes, who was the deputy to Jacko Marie at Standard Bank when he was running the corporate bank, he then left that, he's gone into his own business, he now owns Exclusive Books. He grew up poor in rural Mpumalanga, but he had a teacher who spotted that he was good at maths at the age of 6, and he was grown and he was cultivated and he was given the great opportunities. So poverty harnessed and translated can certainly make a big difference in the lives of ordinary kids. The consequence of this, of course, Marius, is if we do not get a grip on this, if we don't get a handle on this, we are breeding a generation of, and I hate the term, but Fikile Mbalula would be better at using it than me, but of globally competitive losers. Because we're just not going to keep up.
Right, we had a conversation earlier this year at GIBS where we got 60 business leaders, economists together to talk about South Africa's competitiveness and the future of the country economically. And it was interesting sitting with these business and economic leaders that amongst the top 3 issues facing the country, in their view, was the lack of skills amongst the workforce and the education crisis in the country. And that's a lot to do with where the economy is going. If you look at where we were, 30 years ago, a resource economy based on mining, mineral resources, moving towards a knowledge economy, financial services, banking, IT, which is really where we should be playing in Africa. To have that competitive advantage, we need the workforce that can cope with that.
Sure.
And exactly like you're saying, if we're creating a generation of young people without skills, without literacy, without numeracy, where do we employ these? How do we even begin to create the jobs that these people need?
I challenged Koos Becker, the now former chief executive of Naspers, in one of my final interviews with him. I said to him, $5 billion that you're investing in future projects, and you're investing that $5 billion mostly in India. That's not terribly patriotic for a company that used to be called Nasionale Pers. And he said, well, I refuse to invest in a place where maths and science are not taken seriously, where even through the private schooling system was his contention, and he really upset the headmasters of some of South Africa's most prestigious and expensive private schools when he said, even if you go to a place like Bishops and Hilton, the mathematics is inadequate. And it's not breeding a generation of future engineers, thinkers, strategists, people who are going to operate on that technology rather than this technology.
Right. I think, Bruce, importantly, it goes beyond just the discussion about mathematics. Obviously, this is important and it's a critical building block. But like my friend here was saying, that this is part of a much bigger systemic issue in the country. We have 5,400 schools in this country without toilets. So how do we say to a child, go to school, spend a day, learn mathematics when you have to walk 4 or 5 kilometers to get there? There's no infrastructure around you. You get home to parents who maybe aren't literate or don't have mathematical skills themselves.
Who helps you with your homework? Yeah.
It's a much bigger social issue in the country than just a case of having the quality teacher with the student with the passion to do it.
But we do have to tackle the issue somewhere. We have to start somewhere. Whether you start halfway or you start right at grassroots, we've got to start somewhere. And right now, it seems like it's so complicated we don't want to touch it. Is that your sense, Adil?
I don't think so. It's every problem has ways of being tackled. Look, for every situation like this, you need to break down the issues into components. One is we're faced with a critical crisis where the learners do not have the capability. 17.3% of matriculants who wrote maths and science passed last year.
And pass being 33 and above.
33 and above. And the bulk of them are between 33 and 39% of the pass rate. There is a marginal fraction rate which is really below, I think it's about 3% of the ones who passed with high grade, 80% and high outpass, who made it into university. So this is the kind of a crisis we're dealing with. Let me bring you back again to the poverty situation. 80% of those children who passed mathematics, who are eligible to go into university, are actually coming from previously advantaged families.
Sure.
You know why? Because they've got extended support systems that gives them the backup and the support, continuity in terms of the education environment at home rather than within the classroom. So the crisis is not necessarily just one speck of saying mathematics teachers are failing. The teachers are not failing. They're doing what they have within the allotted time, but the challenge is a socio-economic challenge, and it relates back to social values. What do we value most? Koos Becker is right. Why would we have an investment in an economy which does not treasure growth and development, has no futuristic ability to can see the future?
Does this report give us any insight as to how we can tackle it? Because we're having generation after generation of lost opportunity because the current generation can't rely on the previous one, which couldn't rely on the previous one, which couldn't rely on the previous one to provide that support, which privileged families do have.
We have. We've actually, with the report, we've been looking out at delivering solutions around that particular report. We do not research to go and sell our outcome. We research to understand the current crises and challenges in the economy so that we bring out solutions and support mechanisms that provides outcomes in terms of
What does Angie Motshekga need to do then?
The current situation needs to change. We need to now start moving into another platform. You spoke about the digital platform, whereby students can now start getting supplementary, augmentary, as well as extra classes and support. The technology is currently available in South Africa, and where it does not exist, in an instant can be created. We're not a country without the backup in terms of infrastructure, technology, and support. It's just now the means to ensure that this happens. We are currently working on solutions to ensure that we do an entire nationwide rollout program for supplementary as well as augmentary, as well as extra classes related to maths and science. As Whitford Group, we've taken it upon ourselves. We have an education division that specializes and only focuses on education development. The online platform, we believe, that will be the future to disseminating and making classes available 24 hours online, accessible, and it is a click away from a button. So that's really the solution. But then the crisis still sits. The interrelation between the teacher, the student, the school, the environment at home, the ability for all our decision makers, politically and economically, to start supporting these mechanisms.
Marius, you're the futurist. Tell me what this looks like 20 years from now if we don't grasp this problem immediately. The World Economic Forum says we're bottom. It's either it's 147 out of 147 or 148 out of 148. It doesn't matter. We are at the bottom of the global league table in terms of maths and science. If we fail to grasp an opportunity to turn this around, what do we look like 20 years from now?
Well, the big important issue is that this, as we've said, it's a systemic issue. And when you look at things like inequality in the country, the Gini coefficient, and you begin to unpack systemically what is it that causes that inequality and what sustains the inequality, it really is a combination of three factors, which is access to education, access to infrastructure and services, and an unhealthy relationship between business and government elites that feeds into a vicious cycle of enriching the wealthy and impoverishing the poor, or keeping them out of the economic system. And so to answer that question, if we fail to address the education issue, if we fail to take that young child from a disadvantaged background, a poor community, and give them access into the education system in a way that really empowers them, we will be basically forcing them out of the opportunity in this country to share in the wealth. And there's a lot of talk in this country about access to the means of production. We need to realize as a country that in the knowledge economy where the world is going, your mind is the means of production. It's intellectual capital. And so, the debate around mineral resources under the ground is in many ways wrong-headed because it discounts the human capital that we have as a country. And that, there are countries in Africa, Ghana, Kenya, Nigeria, that are harnessing that human capital increasingly. And if we don't harness that in the short term, in the long term, we'll be losing out.
And there we must leave it. What a thought-provoking discussion. Marius Oosthuizen, who's from GIBS. He's a futurist. That's the simplest way of putting it. He talks about the future of business, of course, in South Africa. He runs that project. And Adil Nchabeleng, who's the Group Executive Officer of the Whitford Group of Companies. There'll be more tonight, tomorrow, and more challenging discussions as well. We thank you for watching. I thank my guests this evening for joining me. And I do hope that we start on this increased interest in maths and science. Adil's brought with him this evening a whole group of mathematics PhDs. They speak a language that the rest of us wish we could have an insight into. Maybe there be, in the next 20 years, many more of those. Good night.